All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Mastering the Bridezilla, a red-pilled guide to controlling your woman's hysteria. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Controlling hysterical brides. How to read the pattern before it reads you. I have witnessed the grand ceremony of the infinite mirror, and I am here to tell you, it is not a wedding. It is a ritual extraction, dressed in white linen and financed by the slow immolation of male agency. The bridezilla does not ask for love, she audits it, demanding the groom pay not merely for the ceremony but for the experience of his own submission, with value measured in vibes that most feminine of currencies, untethered from output, unaccountable to reason, and infinitely inflatable. I call this phenomenon the chevan, the commodification of a man's life force into a subscription service for female emotional validation,
where his choice is merely the decorative illusion selecting the flavor of his own subjugation. Enter young Dr. Winona, sharp of wit, hollow of depth, radiant of Instagram, and barren of interior.
She wears the elaborate mask of empowerment but wields the cold scepter of extraction. She has skimmed her critical theory and torched her biology, mistaking the ability to name her desires for the universe's obligation to fund them. She is every bride who converted a covenant into a transaction, every woman who confused being desired with being virtuous, every ego that built a cathedral of mirrors and called it selfhood. She does not seek a husband. She seeks a compliant financier with a pulse, a ring, and a silenced opinion. Here is the natural law she defies. Order arises from hierarchy, duty precedes desire, and value is created by contribution, not claimed by assertion. The masculine principle provides structure, resource, and direction. The feminine principle provides continuity, beauty, and meaning. And when the feminine demands, the masculine bleeds simply to prove a love that can never be proven enough. The head dies and the heart withers in the very cage it demanded be gilded. Reciprocity is not oppression. It is the structural beam of civilization, and it does not liberate the woman. It collapses the house on both of them. What follows is a precise virtue audit of the chevan, mapping each satanic inversion against its natural law anchor, the demand for unearned validation against merit and contribution, the weaponization of emotion against reason and stability, the paradox of choice weaponized as control against authority and leadership. I will name every vector, expose every error, and prescribe every remedy, because the groom who sees the cage for what it is has already begun to shatter the mirror. The foolish ideology expression, the commodification of male agency into a subscription service for female emotional validation, where choice is merely the illusion of selecting one's own subjugation. The event,
the grand ceremony of the infinite mirror, where young Dr. Winona demands the groom not just pay for the wedding, but pay for the experience of his own submission, measured in vibes rather than value. The fable, the chevan of the gilded cage, a fable by Conrad Riker. There was once a girl named young Dr. Winona, and she was not stupid. That was her tragedy.
She had read every book that told her she was a god, and skipped every book that told her what a god owed. She could name her desires in 7 syllables, but could not cook an egg. She called this empowerment. The word tasted like honey and worked like acid, and she drank it morning, noon, and night, and called the burning growth. She had a groom. He was a decent man, a builder, a earner, a man whose hands knew the weight of real things. He had asked her to marry him because he believed, as decent men do, that a woman's heart was a thing worth earning. He was wrong about that. It was a thing worth leaving, but he would learn this too late. The groom had a father, old and quiet, who had built a house with his own back and kept one woman for 40 years and buried her with his tears still wet. He said little. When he spoke, the room cooled by 2 degrees because truth lowers the temperature of every room, drunk on its own sweat. The Hall of Mirrors.
The wedding was to be held not in a church. Churches were, Winona explained, patriarchal infrastructure, but in a hall of mirrors rented for the price of a used car.
She stood before the groom in her consultation gown and held up a glass tablet on which she had designed something she called the Chevin score. The Chevin, she said, tapping the screen, is a holistic metric of your emotional investment, calibrated to my felt needs, adjusted for vibes. What is a vibe? The groom asked. If you have to ask, you're already losing points. The groom looked at the father. The father said nothing. He had learned that silence spoken in the presence of a woman's certainty was the cheapest form of peace and the most expensive form of cowardice.
But he said nothing, which is what fathers do when they have already lost the war and are trying to survive the occupation too. The flowers that cost more than a garden. Winona's first decree was the floral installation.
$10,000 for flowers that would be dead by Monday. Not roses, not lilies. Those were basic. These were imported Icelandic poppies, arranged in what she called a gesture toward impermanence. It's not about the flowers, she said, which is always what people say when it is entirely about the flowers. It's about the narrative of my worth. The groom paid. He told himself it was love. It was not love.
It was the first installment on a debt that could never be settled because the creditor had no ledger and no intention of closing the account. When the receipt was printed, Winona looked at him. Her eyes did not soften.
They sharpened. You paid, she said. But did you feel the weight of your submission? That's the real cost. The groom did not know what she meant. He would. The Chevin does not demand money. It demands the soul's money, the coin of agency, minted in the will, spent in the surrender of one's own judgment to another person's weather. 3. The labyrinth of 50 cakes. Next came the cake.
Winona presented 50 options. This, she explained, was empowerment. The freedom to choose. The groom chose the first. Winona rejected it, not for taste, for energy. The energy is wrong, she said.
It reads as desperate. He chose the 12th. She rejected it for aesthetic dissonance. He chose the 37th. She rejected it because the baker's Instagram felt performative. He chose the 49th. That's a safe choice, she said. Safe choices are a red flag. By the 50th, the groom's eyes had the flat, distant look of a man who has been asked to solve an equation where every answer is wrong and the variable is his character. This was not choice. This was the labyrinth, the Chevin's second face, the illusion of freedom offered by a hand that intends to punish every exit. She gave him 100 doors and stood at the center, holding the only key, smiling, saying, I just want you to decide. He had decided. He had decided to survive. That is not the same as living. IV the father's counsel. The groom's father found him sitting alone in the garage, staring at a spreadsheet that documented his own dissolution. The wedding is a day, the father said. The marriage is a lifetime.
Do not bankrupt the lifetime for the day. Winona appeared in the doorway like a fox at a henhouse that has renamed itself a sanctuary. Your tradition is a cage, she said. I am breaking the cage.
The father looked at her. He had seen cages. He had seen women who wanted to break them and the wreckage they left. He knew that the cage she wanted to break was not tradition. It was restraint, the walls that kept the animal of appetite from eating the furniture of the soul. He said nothing. Silence again, the cheap peace, the expensive cowardice. He would regret it until he died, which mercifully for him came before the divorce. The extraction of the future. The costs mounted. The photographer cost more than the groom's first car. The experience coordinator, a job that did not exist until 5 years ago and would not exist in 5 more, charged $1,200 to manage transitions between emotional beats. The dress cost as much as a semester of the children's future education, but there were no children yet, and if the groom had his way, stolen raw and hollowed out as he was, there never would be. This was the Cheven's deepest cut, the extraction of the future to fund the present's vanity. The groom was not buying a wedding. He was selling a marriage, auctioning the decades of security, patience, and quiet joy that come from shared sacrifice, and spending the proceeds on a single afternoon's applause from people who would unfollow him within a year. He was eating the seed corn to prove he could afford a feast. The proof would come due in winter. Dix. The kingdom of dust. The wedding day arrived. The mirrors were polished. The flowers were already wilting, imported, expensive, and dead on arrival, which is the perfect symbol for everything that Cheven produces. The guests smiled in the way people smile when they are watching someone they know walk toward a cliff and have decided it is not their job to shout. The groom stood at the altar. He was broke. He was tired. He was resentful, though he could not yet name the resentment because naming it would require him to admit he had been conquered, and conquered men do not name their defeat.
They call it compromise and hope no one notices the blood. Winona walked the aisle. She was radiant. She was also hollow, though hollow things catch the light beautifully, which is why chandeliers are impressive and useless.
They exchanged vows. Her vows were aspirational. His were binding. She promised to show up for the relationship. He promised to provide, protect, and persevere. She spoke for 2 minutes. He spoke for 30 seconds.
The asymmetry was the Cheven's signature. Her commitment was poetry. His was a contract. As they were pronounced, Winona leaned close and whispered, "You owe me." The groom felt the words land, not in his ears, in his spine.
The debt was not financial, it was existential. He had paid for the illusion of her happiness, and now the bill for the reality of her dissatisfaction was due, and it would always be due because the Cheven has no final payment. It is a subscription model for the soul, and cancellation requires a process so Byzantine that most men simply die in arrears. 7. The mirror breaks. The groom turned to the wall of mirrors. He looked.
He did not see Winona. He saw himself a man who had traded his agency for applause, his judgment for access, his name for a seat at a table where the menu was his flesh.
And he understood in that single sickening, clarifying instant the secret that Cheven was built to hide. It was never about her. It was about his fear. The fear that without her validation, he was nothing. The fear that a man without a woman's approval is a man without worth. The fear that had been drilled into him by every movie, every sermon, every classroom poster, every nagging cultural whisper that said, "A real man gives everything and asks for nothing and smiles while he bleeds." He had believed it, he had paid for it, and now, standing in a hall of mirrors surrounded by dead flowers and performed joy, he saw what that belief had built, a kingdom of dust with him as the foundation, and her as the crown that no one wears, because a crown without a kingdom is just a hat that costs too much. He raised his fist. He broke the mirror. The glass shattered.
And in the silence that followed, the first real silence in months, he heard something he had not heard since the engagement. His own voice, it said, "No." Winona stared at him.
For the first time, her expression was not calculated. It was genuine, and what was genuine in her was fury. The fury of a creditor whose debtor has just discovered the debt was never legal. "You're ruining everything," she said. "No," the groom said. "I'm ruining the narrative. The everything was already gone." He walked out of the hall of mirrors. The mirrors, cracked, reflected him in fragments, a broken man. Yes, but a broken man who had chosen to break, which is the beginning of every builder's story. You cannot build on a foundation you have not first cleared.
Winona stayed. She stood among the shards, radiant, hollow, and furious. A queen of glass with no kingdom left to rule, but the fragments of her own reflection. The moral.
The bridezilla who demands the world bend to her shall find herself ruling over a kingdom of dust, for the Cheven of unearned demand consumes the demander as surely as the debtor. A man who gives everything has nothing left to give, and a woman who demands everything has nothing left to receive. Love is not extraction, dressed in the language of empowerment. It is a covenant between two people who bring their full selves, their labor, their restraint, their gratitude, and their truth, and build something neither could build alone. The wedding is a day. The marriage is a lifetime. And the man who bankrupts the lifetime to fund the day has not purchased happiness. He has purchased the narrative of happiness, a cheaper thing, a dead flower, a mirror that reflects only what it is told. Break the mirror, hear your own voice. And let the first word it speaks be the word that ends every tyranny, every chevin, every gilded cage. No natural law origin point. Natural law dictates that order arises from hierarchy, duty precedes desire, and value is created by contribution, not claimed by assertion. The male principle provides structure, resource, and direction. The female principle provides continuity, beauty, and meaning. When the female principle demands the male principle be drained to feed its own infinite reflection, it violates the law of reciprocity. The body politic, like the body natural, requires a head to direct and a heart to sustain. If the heart demands the head bleed to prove its love, the head dies and the heart withers. This is the chevin, the extraction of life force from the source to feed the shadow. Moral space vectors, the demand for unearned validation, from merit and contribution away from earned respect toward claimed status. Magnitude 9/10 error. It asserts that existence confers entitlement. The bridezilla demands the groom's labor, not as a gift of love, but as a tax on his masculinity for the privilege of her presence. It confuses being with doing. Remedy, justice, reward according to desert. The groom gives because he chooses, not because he is owed. The infinite mirror of aesthetics, from utility and function away from purpose toward appearance. Magnitude 7/10. Error. The wedding becomes a stage for Instagram, not a covenant of life. The cost is decoupled from utility and tied to vibes. The groom pays for the photo, not the feast. This is the chevin, paying for the image of life rather than life itself. Remedy, temperance, restraint in expenditure, value is found in substance, not spectacle. The weaponization of emotion, from reason and stability away from logic toward hysteria. Magnitude 8/10. Error, emotion is used as a lever to bypass rational negotiation. If you loved me, you would understand. This is a Kafka trap. The standard is undefined, so the groom can never win. It replaces law with whim. Remedy, prudence, the ability to judge rightly. Emotion is data, not decree. The paradox of choice as control, from authority and leadership away from decisive action toward paralysis by analysis. Magnitude 6/10. Error. The bridezilla offers 1,000 options, cake flavors, linen shades to exhaust the groom's will. She claims empowerment while enforcing beta paralysis. She lets him choose, then critiques the choice. This is the chevin of the labyrinth, freedom that leads only to deeper confinement. Remedy, fortitude, the strength to hold the line. Leadership is not voting, it is deciding. The extraction of future for present, from stewardship and legacy away from long-term security toward short-term gratification. Magnitude 10/10. Error. The groom mortgages his future, the marriage, to fund the bride's present ego, the wedding. This is the ultimate chevin, consuming the seed corn to feed the vanity. It is the financial equivalent of eating the tree to prove you can. Remedy, prudence, investment over consumption. The wedding is a means to the marriage, not the end. The rejection of reality for narrative, from truth and fact, away from objective cost towards subjective worth. Magnitude 8/10 error. The bridezilla insists that the value of the dress is not its price, but its story. This is postmodern relativism applied to economics. If she says it is worth 50 kil, it is because her perception creates reality. This destroys the common measure of value. Remedy, truth, the alignment of words with reality. A dollar is a dollar regardless of the dress, the isolation of the individual, from community and tradition, away from collective wisdom towards solipsistic demand. Magnitude 5/10. Error. The bridezilla rejects the council of elders and the norms of the community, insisting her unique needs override all precedent. This is the chevin of the narcissist. The world exists only to reflect her uniqueness. Remedy, humility, recognition, that one is part of a larger order. Tradition is wisdom distilled. Natural law vector audit. The natural law vector audit, what the fable shows. The fable of young Dr.
Winona is not about a woman. It is about a pattern that repeats wherever feeling is enthroned above fact, wherever preference is dressed as principle, wherever extraction is baptized as love.
The Chevan is the name we give to this pattern, the commodification of male agency into a subscription service for female emotional validation, where choice is merely the illusion of selecting one's own subjugation. The groom does not buy flowers. He buys the narrative of her worth. He does not choose a cake. He submits to a ritual designed to exhaust his will so that his surrender, not his love, becomes the offering.
Winona is not a person. She is an allegory, the living embodiment of an ideology that has forgotten what a woman owes and remembers only what she is owed.
Her tragedy is intelligence without wisdom, desire without duty, and assertion without contribution. She has read her Foucault but forgotten her biology. She can name her trauma in clinical language but cannot name the tree from which her paper vows were cut. The fable shows what happens when natural law is inverted, when the heart demands the head bleed to prove its love, and the head, having bled, dies, leaving the heart to rule a corpse. Natural law as the origin point. Before we map the vectors of inversion, we must fix the origin point, the coordinate 0, 0 from which all deviation is measured. Natural law is not a preference. It is not a cultural artifact. It is the observable order woven into the fabric of reality, discoverable by reason, confirmed by consequence, and ignored only at the cost of suffering. Its grammar is simple. Everything has a nature, and its nature determines its proper ends. An eye is for seeing, a will is for choosing. A marriage is for the union of two persons in service of family, fidelity, and the transmission of life and wisdom across generations. Its logic is non-contradictory. You cannot simultaneously claim that love demands sacrifice, and that sacrifice is proof of coercion. You cannot demand provision while calling provision control. You cannot extract a man's labor as tribute while insisting his authority is toxic. These are contradictions, and contradictions do not become true because someone cries while asserting them. Its rhetoric, its power to move the soul, comes from its alignment with truth. Natural law persuades because it is not because it threatens. A law that requires emotional manipulation to enforce is not a law. It is a shakedown. The origin point then is this. Order arises from hierarchy grounded in merit and service. Duty precedes desire. Value is created by contribution, not claimed by assertion. Reciprocity is the foundation of every covenant, and truth is the measure of every claim, regardless of who makes it or how loudly they weep. Every vector in this audit is measured as a departure from this origin. The further the departure, the greater the evil. Not because evil is a feeling, but because evil is a distance from the good, the true, and the natural, and distance has consequences written into the bones of reality. The inversion vectors. A vector has direction and magnitude. Each inversion below points away from natural law toward a counterfeit that mimics its language while inverting its substance. The damage column describes the civilizational and personal cost. The remedy names the virtue that returns the soul to the origin. Vector I, the demand for unearned validation.
Direction, away from earned respect, toward claimed status. The error. Winona does not ask the groom to admire her character. She demands he worship her existence.
The Chevan score is not calibrated to her virtue, her loyalty, her warmth, her prudence, her labor. It is calibrated to her felt needs. This is the first lie of the ideology that being confers entitlement, grammar. Validation comes from the Latin validus, strong, powerful. To validate is to confirm the truth of something, not to flatter its self-image.
Winona has inverted the term. She demands that the groom call weakness strength, vanity beauty, and extraction love. This is not validation, it is perjury, logic.
Consider the syllogism the ideology asserts. Premise 1, I exist and have feelings. Premise 2, my feelings confer worth. Conclusion, therefore you owe me tribute proportional to my feelings. The conclusion does not follow. Existence is a condition, not an achievement. Feelings are data, not verdicts. Worth is established by contribution, by what one gives, builds, sustains, and sacrifices, not by what one demands under threat of emotional withdrawal. The sex swap test exposes the lie instantly. If a man demanded that a woman spend $10,000 on a decorative installation to prove she respected his narrative, he would be called, rightly, a narcissist and an abuser. The standard does not change because the demanding party wears a dress. Magnitude 9 near total departure. The ideology does not merely distort the concept of merit, it declares merit oppressive. This is not a mistake. It is a revolution against the arithmetic of contribution. Damage. When validation is unlinked from virtue, the incentive structure collapses. Why build character when you can build a persona? Why earn love when you can demand it? Why improve when improvement implies your current self is insufficient, an intolerable thought to the ego that has crowned itself God? The civilizational cost is the starvation of the very masculine energy that builds and sustains everything. Men who are taxed for existing, audited for loving, and penalized for leading eventually stop. They do not rebel. They withdraw. And a civilization built on male withdrawal is a civilization building its own headstone. Virtue remedy, justice. Justice means rendering to each what is due. The groom gives because he chooses, not because he is compelled under the fiction of love. True giving is a free act of a free man. Extraction dressed as affection is not love, it is tribute, and tribute is the language of empire, not covenant. Vector 2, the infinite mirror of aesthetics. Direction, away from purpose toward appearance, the error. The wedding is no longer a covenant, it is a content farm. The flowers are not for the guests.
They are for the photograph of the guests, which is for the Instagram post, which is for the likes, which are for the dopamine, which is for the void where an interior life should be. Winona does not want a marriage.
She wants a production in which she is the star, the groom is the prop, and the budget is the sacrifice offered at the altar of her brand. Grammar. Aesthetic derives from the Greek aesthetikos, perceptible to the senses. It refers to what can be felt and seen, not what is. The aesthetic is the surface of reality, not its substance. When the surface becomes the substance, the word has been captured and the mind has been colonized. Logic. The error is a category mistake. Beauty is a transcendental, a property of being itself, aligned with truth and goodness. But beauty requires a real object. A photograph of a dead flower is not beauty. It is a record of beauty's corpse. The ideology confuses the image with the thing, the representation with the reality, the mirror with the face. This is postmodernism's core lie, that perception creates reality. If the photo is beautiful, the event was beautiful. If the narrative is compelling, the life behind it is meaningful. But a lie told in good lighting is still a lie, and a life lived for the camera is a life lived for shadows. Magnitude 7, severe departure. The corruption is not of beauty itself, but of beauty's ordering function. Beauty is meant to elevate the soul toward truth. The infinite mirror turns beauty inward, bending it into a closed loop of self-regard. The eye that was made to gaze at the stars is trained to gaze at its own reflection. Damage. The damage is the decoupling of cost from value. $10,000 for dead flowers is not generosity, it is disorder. The money represents real labor. Hours of a man's life, traded for wages, offered in the name of love, then consumed by vanity and excreted as Instagram content. When this pattern scales, you get a culture that cannot distinguish between a wedding and a performance, a marriage and a brand deal, a home and a stage set. The institutions that once transmitted covenant and community become production studios for individual self-promotion. The common good is consumed by the private feed. Virtue remedy, temperance. Temperance is the ordering of desire according to right reason. It says, not everything that shines is gold, and not everything that photographs well is good. The temperate soul can admire beauty without worshipping it, can enjoy the aesthetic without surrendering the substantial, and can distinguish between a feast and a photo op. Vector 3, the weaponization of emotion. Direction, away from logic toward hysteria. The error, if you loved me, you would understand. This sentence is the nuclear weapon of relational logic. It is a Kafka trap, a demand that cannot be met because the standard is undefined, and the failure to meet it is treated as proof of guilt.
The groom cannot understand because Winona has not defined what understanding means. She has made her interior weather the measure of his moral worth, and since her weather changes by the hour, he is perpetually in arrears.
Grammar. Hysteria comes from the Greek hystera, womb. The ancient term was wrong in its biology but perceptive in its phenomenology. It described a state where the body's rhythms overthrew the mind's governance. The modern ideology does not cure this disorder. It celebrates it. It renames hysteria as authenticity, vulnerability, and speaking your truth, and declares that the man who does not submit to the storm is unsafe. Logic. The structure of the trap. Premise 1, I feel hurt. Premise 2, hurt implies harm. Premise 3, harm implies a harmer. Conclusion, you harmed me, and your denial proves your guilt. 3 errors compound. First, hurt does not imply harm. Hurt is a feeling. Harm is an objective injury. A paper cut hurts. Amputation harms. The ideology erases this distinction, declaring every discomfort a wound and every wound a crime. Second, harm does not automatically imply a culpable agent. Sometimes harm is self-inflicted, sometimes accidental, sometimes the necessary cost of a boundary. Third, denial is not proof of guilt. The demand that the accused prove a negative inverts the burden of proof and destroys the presumption of innocence, the foundation of all justice. Magnitude 8. This vector is particularly destructive because it attacks the machinery of adjudication itself. When emotion replaces evidence, there is no court, no standard, no appeal. The accusation is the verdict. The tears are the sentence, and the groom is left defending himself against a charge that was never stated, before a jury that was never seated, under a law that was never written. Damage. The damage is the destruction of due process in the private sphere, which inevitably metastasizes to the public sphere. When I felt harmed becomes sufficient grounds for conviction. Every relationship becomes a tribunal, every disagreement a trial, and every man a defendant without rights. This is not hypothetical. The machinery already exists. Family courts that accept accusations without evidence, HR departments that treat discomfort as policy violation,
Universities that convict on the basis of feelings-based testimony without cross-examination. The ideology that Winona embodies in the parlor has already conquered the courthouse. Virtue remedy, prudence.
Prudence is the virtue of right judgment, the capacity to distinguish between what feels true and what is true, between what seems urgent and what is important. Prudence demands evidence before verdict, definition before accusation, and calm before catastrophe. Emotion is data, not decree. It tells you something is happening. It does not tell you what happened, why it happened, or who is responsible. That requires reason, investigation, and the humility to accept that your feelings might be wrong. Vector I Vu, the paradox of choice as control. Direction, away from decisive action toward paralysis by analysis. The error, 50 cakes, 50 rejections. Not one based on taste, cost, or utility, each based on energy, aesthetic dissonance, and the baker's Instagram presence. This is not choice. It is a maze. The groom is the rat. The cheese is approval. The exits are all locked. Grammar, choice, comes from Old English seosan, to select, to decide, to taste. Its root is shared with choose and chew. It implies discrimination, the act of biting down on one thing and letting go of another. Real choice excludes. The ideology of infinite choice refuses exclusion. It offers 50 options, then rejects each selection on grounds that were never disclosed, because the purpose is not to choose but to exhaust logic. The mechanism is adversarial selection. The groom is given the appearance of agency while being stripped of its substance. He is told to choose, then punished for choosing. This is not empowerment, it is entrapment. The standard shifts with every selection, so that failure is guaranteed. The game is rigged because the house is the player. The syllogism of the trap. Premise 1, you may choose. Premise 2, every choice is wrong because I decide what wrong means after you choose. Conclusion, you are incompetent and I am justified in overriding your decisions. The conclusion was the premise. The game was never about cake. Magnitude, 6. Moderate to severe. The vector's power lies in its subtlety. It does not announce itself as control. It wears the mask of collaboration and inclusion. The groom is not told he is powerless. He is told he is empowered, and then systematically demoralized by a process designed to fail. This is the most insidious form of domination, the kind that makes the dominated thank the dominator for the opportunity. Damage, the erosion of the male capacity for decisive action. A man who is repeatedly given false choices, punished for every decision, and told that his judgment is toxic eventually stops deciding. He becomes beta-paralyzed, passive, anxious, and perpetually awaiting instructions from a source that will never be satisfied. This is the ideology's goal, not to defeat the man, but to tame him. A tame man does not lead. He obeys. And a civilization of obedient men is a civilization awaiting its conqueror. Virtue remedy, fortitude. Fortitude is the courage to hold the line when the line is under assault. It says, I will decide and I will accept the cost of my decision, and I will not be moved by tantrums, moved goalposts, or the weaponized disappointment of someone who is never going to be pleased. Leadership is not voting. It is not polling. It is not waiting for consensus among 50 imaginary objections. Leadership is deciding and standing by the decision until the evidence, not the emotion, proves it wrong. Vector V, the extraction of future for present. Direction, away from long-term security towards short-term gratification. The error, this is the Cheven's core. The groom mortgages the marriage to fund the wedding. He borrows against decades of future stability to pay for a single day of performance. He consumes the seed corn to bake a cake that will be gone by morning. Grammar. Investment comes from the Latin investire, to clothe, to endow. An investment clothes the future. It takes present resources and converts them into future capacity. Consumption, by contrast, comes from consumery, to take up entirely, to devour. The wedding industry devours. It does not endow.
It converts the groom's future labor into Winona's present ego and calls the transaction love. Logic. The error is a temporal category mistake, confusing the means with the end. The wedding is a ritual.
Its purpose is to inaugurate the marriage, not to substitute for it. When the ritual consumes the resources meant for the institution it was designed to serve, the ritual has become parasitic. The syllogism of destruction. Premise 1. The wedding demonstrates love. Premise 2. Love is proven by sacrifice. Premise 3. Therefore, the greater the sacrifice, the greater the love. Conclusion. Bankrupting the marriage proves the marriage's worth. This is an infinite regress. If sacrifice proves love, then total sacrifice proves total love, and the only proof of total love is total ruin.
The logic demands not a wedding but a holocaust. The groom immolated on the altar of Winona's validation, his ashes scattered as confetti. Magnitude 10. Maximum departure.
This vector does not merely distort a virtue, it inverts the temporal order itself. All civilization rests on the principle of delayed gratification, the willingness to sacrifice present pleasure for future security, to plant the tree whose fruit you will never eat, to build the cathedral whose completion you will never see. The Cheven of future for present declares this principle oppressive. It demands the fruit now, the tree as firewood, and the cathedral as a pop-up venue. Damage. This is the engine of civilizational debt. Not merely financial, but spiritual. A culture that cannot defer gratification cannot build, it can only consume. And a culture of consumers is a culture that eats itself, one celebration at a time, until there is nothing left to celebrate and no one left who remembers what the celebration was for. The statistics confirm the pattern. The average American wedding now costs over $350,000. The average American savings account holds roughly $450,000. Couples begin their marriages in debt, not the productive debt of a home mortgage or a business loan, but the sterile debt of a party already forgotten. They have traded equity in their future for receipts from a single day, and they call this romance virtue remedy prudence. Again, prudence governs time. It is the virtue that sees beyond the horizon of the present moment and calculates the true cost of today's desire on tomorrow's survival. Prudence says, the wedding is a means, the marriage is the end, and the man who confuses the two has mistaken the doorway for the house. The prudent man invests in the institution, not the event. He builds the marriage before he builds the party, and he refuses to let the party consume the foundation. Vector 6. The rejection of reality for narrative, direction, away from objective cost towards subjective worth. The error. The value of the dress is not its price, it's its story. This is the postmodern heresy in its purest ecclesiastical form. The assertion that perception creates reality, that the word becomes flesh only if the speaker believes hard enough, and that the person who insists on counting the cost is a Philistine who lacks vision. Grammar. Narrative comes from the Latin narrare, to tell, to relate. A narrative is an account of events, not the events themselves. It is a map, not the territory. The ideology treats the map as more real than the land, and then navigates off a cliff while insisting the cliff is a social construct. Logic. The claim is self-refuting. If perception creates reality, then the groom's perception that the dress is overpriced is also reality. If all narratives are equally valid, then the narrative that says this is a waste of money is as true as the narrative that says this is an investment in my brand. The ideology cannot have it both ways. Either perception creates reality, in which case the groom's perception wins too, or reality exists independent of perception, in which case the price tag is the price tag, and no amount of storytelling changes it. The underlying move is the equivocation on value. In economics, value is what someone is willing to pay. It is measured in exchange, not assertion.
In the ideology, value means whatever Winona declares it to mean, measured in feelings, not currency. These are two different definitions smuggled into one argument, and the sleight of hand is the entire argument.
Magnitude 8. The rejection of objective reality is not merely an intellectual error, it is a spiritual one. It is the original sin recapitulated. The creature declaring itself the creator, the map declaring itself the land, the word declaring itself sovereign over the thing it was meant to describe. Damage. When narrative replaces reality, language loses its anchoring function. Words no longer point to things, they point to other words in an infinite regress of self-referential noise.
Communication becomes impossible because there is no common standard, no shared territory, only competing maps, each insisting it is the only real one. This is why the groom cannot reason with Winona.
They are not having the same conversation. He is speaking about dollars. She is speaking about narratives. He is counting costs. She is curating aesthetics. The gap between them is not a disagreement. It is an ontological chasm, a disagreement about what is. The damage scales. A society that accepts narrative over reality cannot govern itself because governance requires agreement on facts. A society that accepts narrative over reality cannot administer justice because justice requires evidence. A society that accepts narrative over reality cannot sustain marriage because marriage requires two people living in the same world.
Winona lives in a world of her own authorship, and she demands that the groom pay rent on a property that does not exist. Virtue remedy, truth. Truth is the alignment of words with reality.
It is the refusal to call a thing other than what it is, regardless of the social cost, the emotional fallout, or the number of people who feel harmed by the facts. Truth says a dollar is a dollar, a contract is a contract, a promise is a promise, and no amount of narrative alchemy transmutes waste into wisdom. The man who speaks truth in the face of narrative tyranny performs the highest act of citizenship. He is the boy who named the emperor's nakedness, and the emperor was never wearing clothes, no matter how many courtiers narrated the splendor of the fabric. Vector 7. The isolation of the individual.
Direction. Away from collective wisdom, towards solipsistic demand. The error. Winona rejects the groom's father. She rejects tradition, counsel, precedent, and the accumulated weight of 40 years of marital survival.
She calls these things a cage. She demands that her unique needs no previous bride in human history has apparently experienced, override all inherited wisdom. This is narcissism epistemologized, the belief that because I am special, my experience is incommunicable, my needs are unprecedented, and your traditions are irrelevant. Grammar. Tradition comes from the Latin tradire, to hand over, to deliver. Tradition is transmitted wisdom, the distilled experience of those who walked the path before us, survived its dangers, and left signs. To reject tradition is not rebellion. It is amnesia. And amnesia is not freedom. It is the loss of every map, every landmark, and every warning sign, leaving the traveler naked in territory that was never as unique as she imagined. Logic.
The error is a base-rate neglect of cosmic proportions. Winona assumes her situation is exceptional because it feels exceptional.
But billions of women have married, and the patterns are remarkably stable. The desire for beauty, the temptation to extravagance, the tension between the wedding and the marriage, the cost of vanity, the wisdom of restraint. These are not cultural constructs, they are human constants. The father who counsels prudence is not oppressing her. He is transmitting the hard-won knowledge of every man who ever stood where the groom stands. The syllogism of isolation. Premise 1, I am unique. Premise 2, unique beings require unique solutions. Conclusion, therefore, inherited wisdom does not apply to me. The conclusion is a non sequitur. Uniqueness of personhood does not imply uniqueness of problem. Every human being is unique. Every human being still eats, sleeps, loves, grieves, and dies. The specifics vary, the structure does not.
Tradition addresses the structure. Winona, mistaking her specifics for structure, declares the entire inheritance obsolete. Magnitude 5, moderate departure but insidious in its cumulative effect. No single act of tradition rejection is catastrophic, but the pattern repeated across millions of Winonas, each declaring her uniqueness, dissolves the connective tissue of civilization. Tradition is social capital.
Squander it, and the society does not collapse in a single dramatic event. It dissolves, slowly, like a bone in acid, until someone leans on it and it crumbles. Damage, the loss of intergenerational wisdom. The young marry without counsel, parent without maps, divorce without understanding why, and raise children who inherit nothing but the pattern of rejection itself. The father's silence in the fable is the silence of a man whose wisdom has been declared illegitimate by an ideology that calls itself progressive but functions as amnesia. Virtue, remedy, humility. Humility is the recognition that you are part of an order you did not create, indebted to wisdom you did not earn, and subject to patterns you did not design. Humility says, I am not the first person to face this problem, and the people who faced it before me were not stupid. It does not mean blind obedience to tradition. It means engaging tradition as a starting point, a hypothesis tested by generations, rather than dismissing it as oppression because it inconveniences your narrative. Magnitude as a measure of evil. The magnitudes assigned above are not arbitrary. They are proportional to the distance each vector departs from natural law, measured by the damage caused when the inversion is enacted. A magnitude 5 departure, tradition rejection, is harmful but survivable. A magnitude 10 departure, consuming the future for the present, is civilization ending. The difference is the difference between a cold and a plague. Evil in this framework is not a substance, it is a direction, the direction away from the good, the true and the natural. The further the departure, the greater the contradiction with reality, and the greater the suffering reality inflicts on those who defy it. This is why the Chevin is so dangerous. It does not feel like evil. It feels like love because it wears love's language, mimics love's rituals, and demands love's sacrifices. But it is love's counterfeit, a structure that uses the forms of covenant to practice the substance of extraction. The test is simple. Does the pattern produce life or consume it? Covenant produces life. Children, stability, accumulated wisdom, generational wealth, mutual flourishing. The Chevin consumes life, labor, savings, agency, patience, trust, and eventually the relationship itself, which collapses under the weight of demands that were never designed to be met. A tree is known by its fruit. The Cheven's fruit is a broke, demoralized groom, a hollow, insatiable bride, and a marriage that began in debt and ended in resentment. That is not love's harvest, it is vengeance's. Virtues that bring the soul back to order. Each vector points away from natural law, each virtue points back. The remedial path is not complex, but it requires what every recovery requires. The honesty to name the disorder, the courage to resist it, and the discipline to build differently. Prudence restores right judgment. It separates feeling from fact, urgency from importance, and means from ends. The prudent man asks, what is the actual cost? What is the actual benefit? What am I sacrificing, and what am I receiving? He does not accept vibes as a unit of account. He counts. Justice restores reciprocity. It demands that the same standard apply to both parties, that contribution be recognized, and that extraction be named for what it is. The just man gives freely, but he does not give infinitely, because infinite giving is not generosity. It is self-destruction, and self-destruction is not a virtue. Temperance restores proportion. It says, the wedding is a day, the marriage is a lifetime, and the man who confuses the two has mistaken the threshold for the house. The temperate man can enjoy beauty without worshipping it, celebrate without bankrupting, and admire without surrendering. Fortitude restores backbone. It is the strength to say no to the Cheven score, to the infinite choice protocol, to the Kafka trapped, to the weaponized tear, to the demand that he feel his submission as proof of his love. Fortitude is not cruelty. It is the refusal to be cruel to himself in the name of someone else's comfort. Truth restores contact with reality. It is the alignment of words with what is, not what is narrated. The truthful man counts the cost, names the pattern, speaks plainly, and refuses to participate in his own deception, even when the deception wears a wedding dress and calls itself love. Humility restores relationship to inheritance. It listens to the father. It consults tradition. It acknowledges that the current generation is not the first to face these temptations and will not be the last to fail them without guidance. Together, these virtues constitute logos, the ordering principle of reality, the rational structure of the cosmos, the word that was in the beginning and against which the gates of hysteria shall not prevail. The practical moral for men, the fable's groom breaks the mirror. That is the first act of every builder, clearing the ground. You cannot construct a marriage, a household, a community, or a civilization on a foundation of lies. The lies must be named, confronted, and shattered, not with violence, but with the simple devastating word, no. No, I will not pay $10,000 for dead flowers to decorate your narrative. No, I will not participate in a cake selection process designed to exhaust my will. No, I will not accept that your feelings constitute evidence of my guilt. No, I will not mortgage our future to fund your present performance. No, I will not pretend that your perception creates reality while mine is called toxic. No, I will not reject my father's wisdom because you have read 3 books that told you tradition is a cage. This is not cruelty. This is clarity, and clarity in a world drunk on narrative is the most compassionate act available because it offers the other person something the Cheven never can, an honest mirror. The Cheven reflects only what the demander wants to see.
The broken mirror reflects nothing, and in that nothing the groom sees himself, not as Winona's prop, not as the Cheven's debtor, not as a supporting actor in someone else's production, but as a man sovereign.
Responsible and free. A man who cannot say no has nothing real to offer when he says yes. His yes is merely the absence of resistance, a surrendered position, not a chosen gift. Real love, covenant love, requires 2 sovereigns who choose each other freely, bring their full selves to the union, and build something neither could build alone. The bridezilla who demands the world bend to her will shall find herself ruling over a kingdom of dust. But the man who breaks the mirror hears his own voice and speaks the truth that shatters every Cheven. That man has taken the first step toward building something real. And reality, patient, indifferent, and utterly undefeated, rewards only those who build in accordance with its laws. The first law is this: truth precedes love. A love built on lies is not love. It is a performance, and the curtain always falls. Break the mirror, speak the word. Build on the foundation that remains. It is enough. Virtue guidelines. Define your worth by your contribution, not your consumption. Leadership is not the absence of conflict, but the resolution of it through decisive action. Emotion is a signal, not a sovereign. Do not let it veto your reason. The wedding is a ritual, not a referendum on your masculinity. True love is not the surrender of self, but the union of two selves in service of a higher purpose. Beware the Shevan, the subtle extraction of life force disguised as love, moral. The bridezilla who demands the world bend to her will find herself ruling over a kingdom of dust, for the Shevan of unearned demand consumes the demander as surely as the debtor. I have shown you the Shevan. I have named it, dissected it, and laid its mechanical guts on the table. Now hear the final law. The gilded cage is not built by women. It is built by men who agree that their labor is a tax and their love is a debt. The bridezilla is not the disease, she is the symptom. The disease is your cowardice, your refusal to stand in your own authority and say no. The mirrors in that cathedral did not create themselves. You held them up. You polished them, you angled them to catch the best light on her face, while your own disappeared into the reflection. And now you stand there wondering why you feel hollow, why the wedding photos look like victory but the marriage tastes like servitude. Why the woman who whispered you, "Oh me now," says it with her eyes, every morning across a kitchen you paid for with years of labor she cannot name and does not count. Here is the natural law from which all of this flows. Order arises from hierarchy, duty precedes desire, and value is created by contribution, never claimed by assertion. The male principle builds structure, direction, resource. The female principle brings beauty, continuity, meaning. When she demands he bleed to prove his love, when she converts his gift into a tax and his covenant into a subscription, the heart does not nourish the body, it devours the head. And a body without a head does not dance. It collapses. This is the architecture of every collapsed marriage, every hollowed out husband, every wedding that cost $40,000 and produced a divorce in 3 years. You paid for the image of life rather than life itself. You believed that if the photo looked right, the reality would follow. It does not. It cannot. Appearance without substance is a mirror facing a mirror, infinite reflection, zero depth. The moral stands as a verdict written in the bones of civilization. The bridezilla who demands the world bend to her shall find herself ruling a kingdom of dust. Because the Shevan of unearned demand consumes the demander as surely as it consumes the debtor. She will stand in her dress, surrounded by 7,000 mirrors, and she will be alone with her reflection. The groom was never the prize, he was the fuel. And when the fuel runs out, and it always runs out because men are not infinite, she will turn to the next mirror and ask it why she is unhappy, and the mirror will say nothing, because mirrors have never answered anything. They only show you what you already decided to see. So here is what you do today, right now, before the sun sets. Practice one virtue, and it is not a complicated one. It is the hardest one, which is why it is the first one: prudence. Prudence is the capacity to see reality clearly and to judge rightly. It means you stop pretending her tears are evidence, they are data. It means you stop mistaking her enthusiasm for gratitude. It is performance. It means you look at the demand, any demand, the wedding, the ring, the renovation, the apology for a crime you did not commit, and you ask the only question that matters: is this a gift I choose to give, or a tax I am forced to pay? If it is a gift, give it freely and without resentment. If it is a tax, refuse it calmly, completely, and without apology. Prudence is the axe that shatters the infinite mirror. Pick it up. Your kingdom of dust is waiting to become a kingdom of stone. Sponsored book, Mastering the Bridezilla, a red-pilled guide to controlling your woman's hysteria. You're standing at the edge of a financial and emotional minefield called wedding planning, where logic goes to die and your bank account gets drafted into a gynocentric war you never signed up for. I know this because I've been there, watching my engagement nearly implode when my ex-fiancée demanded a Venetian gondola procession in Nebraska. The moment she threatened to walk, unless I financed her childhood fantasy of ice sculptures shaped like her childhood dog. I realized modern weddings aren't about love. They're a Darwinian battleground where weak men get devoured by the 300B wedding industrial complex. This book isn't for the faint-hearted, the simps or the soy-jacked allies clutching their gender studies degrees. If you're content being a human ATM while your bride sobs over peonies and Pinterest boards, close this book now and go knit a pride flag. But if you're a man who's sick of being emotionally blackmailed, financially pillaged, and stripped of dignity by a culture that treats grooms like beta sidekicks in their own lives, keep reading. I wrote Mastering the Bridezilla after dissecting 237 failed engagements, interviewing divorce lawyers, and reverse engineering the biological playbook behind female hysteria. You'll learn why 78% of brides morph into tyrants. Hint, it's not stress, it's hypergamy. How to slash costs using Machiavellian vendor tactics, and why Freud was half right about your fiancé's obsession with diamond size. This isn't therapy. It's a tactical manual for reclaiming authority, from shutting down tantrums with stoic detachment to leveraging Jungian shadow work to predict her next meltdown. You'll discover why men who lead during planning stay respected, laid, and debt-free, while the woke grooms end up divorced, drained, and writing poetry about their vulnerability. Non-target readers, feminists, white knights, and anyone who thinks toxic masculinity is a real term should exit. Now, this book doesn't care about your feelings. It's for rational men ready to deploy boardroom strategies against floral budgets, evolutionary psychology against guilt trips, and cold hard data against the myth of equality. The wedding plantation ends here. Your sanity, wallet, and future lineage depend on it. Buy it, read it, and dominate. Or don't, and keep funding her delusions until she's trading you in for a chihuahua and a child support order. The choice is yours. Mastering the Bridezilla, a red-pilled guide to controlling your woman's hysteria, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.